office. I'm going to be talking to you about our legal aid program for vets and service members, and then later my colleague Nelson will be talking to you about the revision, the AAG revision. Just a little bit about myself. I'm connected to the military. My husband is a Navy vet, and I also work for the Veterans Project during law school, which is part of Northwest Justice Project. Okay, so as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, there are over 540,000 military members and veterans in Washington State, and many of them are dealing with legal issues on more than one. Some of the legal issues are something we can all experience, such as family law issues, like when we get a divorce, giving parenting plans, job support, eviction issues, unemployment benefits, dealing with debt collection or creating a will. So it's something that anyone can experience. But there's also vet and service member specific legal issues, such as potential service members who will be act violations or applying for disability compensation or discharge upgrades. So keeping that all in mind, the Attorney General's office requested legislation in 2017 to create this office, office OMVLA, and it was created to facilitate civil legal assistance between low-income vets and service members and pro bono assistance, which is free legal assistance. We have the authority to recruit and train volunteers. We maintain a list of resources that are relevant to vets and service members facing legal issues. We have a military and veterans resource guide that I'll show later. And then we also do the connection between the vet or service member and the attorney, so that we can take the assessment of the needs and then find it out. There's a lot of services for vets in the state and service members, and there's a lot of civil legal aid offices. OMVLA is intended to add to that, not to take away one space. We want to work with the community, we want to work with other organizations that already exist, and potentially partner with them on training or assistance. And that's what, that's what they're doing, education and training for our attorneys so they can be better advocates. Facilitate the direct representation, which I'll talk about, and then again, file research. So here's another acronym for you. In 2018, we created under OMVLA the Military Engagement and Directed Advocacy by Lawyers program, which is called MEDAL. That is the meat and potatoes of OMVLA. That is the direct connection between an attorney and the vet or service member. They can be a qualifying service member. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And we collaborate with military legal assistance offices, the private bar association, and other legal services organizations to get volunteers. I'm sure it doesn't need to be said, but why it's important to get direct representation is veterans and service members who are facing legal issues, it can be very overwhelming and difficult to navigate by yourself. There was a study, a PA study in 2019, this is a national study that found that legal assistance was one of the top 4 unmet needs for the veteran community in the country. And then within Washington, there was a 2015 civil legal needs update, which found that veterans, low-income veterans face more legal issues than other low-income populations. So this is it's very important. There's more studies that show that veterans facing legal issues are more vulnerable to poverty. That's of course exacerbated by vulnerable populations such as Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBT+ veterans, disabled veterans, because of the systemic inequities that are already there. So that's what this program gets at, is helping start address that. It's a huge need. We can't tackle all of it at once. And this is a fairly new program, but we're starting to chip away at that. So who is eligible for assistance? Have to be currently serving in the armed forces or have served in the armed forces, and that includes Guard and Reserve. You have to be domiciled or stationed in one really a resource for people who have an ongoing legal issue in Washington and they move somewhere else, because that new state won't help them either. Because like, well, we don't know Washington law, so we can't help. So I do my best to point them in the right direction if I do get that kind of request, but we can't utilize our pro bono funds for that. What's different about OMVLA than other civil legal aid programs is the income eligibility. Most civil legal aid programs cap their income at 200% of the federal poverty level and below. We doubled that to 400%. Obviously, that lets us reach a wider segment of the population. And that's in work because there's a lot of vets and service members between that 200 and 400 mark that can't afford an attorney because attorneys are very expensive, but also don't qualify for other civil legal aid. So sometimes OMVLA is the only option. They can't otherwise be represented. I don't see that come up. If someone has an attorney, they probably won't call us. And they have to be seeking assistance with a civil matter. We don't assist with criminal matters. Just some examples of some cases I've seen recently. In terms of estate planning, we have attorneys help veterans and service members pay bills. It's a pretty easy thing for an attorney to do. It's a straight issue. We don't see that a lot. Landlord-tenant, we don't see a lot of eviction issues. I do see I did see someone attempt to get, the landlord was attempting to evict the veteran because he had a service animal, which is not legal. So we had an attorney write a letter to the landlord to stop that process. Consumer issues, that's what my colleague will be researching on later. And then family law, that is the vast majority of legal issues you see, probably over 50% of cases in OMVLA are family law related, usually having to do with creating parenting plans or modifying parenting plans or child support or something like that.
Does that go into paternity as well?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
My name is Kat Kesey, and I'm with the VIP program associated with the HOSWA, the Housing Opportunities of Southwest Washington. We deal with homeless veterans and put them in transitional housing and set them up with support systems. And currently, one of the things that we are dealing with is a veteran who is dealing with a family law thing, but it's not his children, it's his stepchildren, and she's not actually the veteran, but it is the veteran's household. Would they qualify for this kind of help?
Yeah, I should have said, are they married, or is she considered a dependent at all? Or?
She's considered a dependent.
Yes. Yeah,
Oh.
sorry, I should have said spouse and dependent or Indian are also. Thank you for, yes, that's something I missed. I see her right. Is this service number civil relief act?
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Oh yeah, so this is just how our service model looks. So going from left to right. On the left, the general public or a referring office will fill out an intake form. We have a web form. We also have paper forms. You can call me, voicemail, envelope email. The goal is to make it as accessible as possible. I walk people through the intake form before I fill it out for them before you can fill it out on behalf of someone else. Anyway, it all comes into OMVLA. I'm the only full-time employee in OMVLA, so it comes to me, and then I call every veteran or service member who fills out an intake form, and I do an intake with them. I see what the situation is and assess what's going on. And then it can go a number of places after that. A lot of times I can just send them information or resources that will help solve their legal issues for them. There's a website called WashingtonLawHelp.org, which is an amazing resource. So go there first. They even have interactive tools that will fill out court forms for you if you just answer questions, and it tells you where to file and how and stuff like that. A lot of times I send people there as kind of a first step. We're working on starting legal clinics around the state. I think we have 4 in the works right now, and that's just a way for attorneys and vets and service members to meet in person and have maybe a half hour or 40 minutes to get legal advice, which I know can be helpful for lot of times the situation does require direct representation from an attorney to a service member. And then the end goal is service provider. My goal personally, everyone who calls in, I try to give them something to go off of, some direction to go. They're always free to call back if that doesn't work out. Yeah, this is what the webpage looks like. That's a big button to press for filling out the intake. We ask for name and address to verify that they're Washington. Meet their discharge status if they have been discharged. We can help dishonorably discharged veterans, but not as much as the other statuses. And then we also need to account for.
What's the timeline on this? If you fill out the form and send it in, how long can they expect before they get a reply and stuff starts moving?
My goal is within a week.
Okay.
Sometime within 2 weeks. And if I see that, I read every request as it comes in, and if I see kind of an emergency situation, I'll call right away.
Okay.
Yeah. But some things, I mean, the legal system moves really slow sometimes, like I can probably wait a day or two to call the person. So,
I'm just thinking this would be easier than the Northwest Chapter program.
yeah, they're pretty backed up too, so.
A question regarding disability statuses for veterans. Even if they don't meet the income requirement, would that be one of your categories that are given assistance or?
If they're over income.
Correct.
I will, well, I'll still try to point them in the right direction. We just can't use the pro bono attorneys at that point.
Okay.
I always try to point people in the right, even if they're asking about a criminal matter, I'll try to help if I can. Yeah. Yes.
So, kind of an odd question, right? Or more of a statement, but I recently referred a veteran to, which I believe is this program, and he's very upset that the Attorney General is calling him, mainly because he was under the impression that you shouldn't trust prosecutors, and that's kind of that mental,
Yeah.
really much associated with mental health conditions. But I was kind of thinking, like, what are some good ways to maybe reframe that, like, kind of language-wise, in terms of, like, I imagine that this is like a totally separate, well, fairly separate mission for the AG's office from what other things are doing. So, kind of find ways to communicate that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen that come up a couple of times as well. Yeah, I don't have a great answer for that right now. This is the registration and volunteer page. We offer 3 different ways to volunteer: the direct representation, the return legal clinic is coming up, and then training and mentoring. So an attorney can mentor another volunteer attorney in case they're new or they haven't practiced this very well.
Me again.
Yeah, sure.
When do those legal clinics come up, and is there like a place where you can find out where they're at and stuff?
Yeah, I imagine we'll post to this website once it's up and running. We're kind of going county by county right now. We're starting in Clark County. Can't remember when I started in Clark County. And then we also have like Ohio.
Okay.
But yeah, it would be on the main webpage. Yeah.
Are there any ethical issues with, like, say, the JAG from a reserve unit volunteering? Any issues with them serving for a command and volunteering?
I don't know.
As far as the legal clinics go, is there like a website that kind of shows upcoming events, or are those events shared once you fill out the form?
Yeah, that would also, so on the main page, I should have had a picture of it. There is an upcoming events. Now, it hasn't been updated in a while because it's stopped everything, but once we get that going, that's where it will be. Yeah. I might get you to do a newsletter though, that might help with all the different programs we have. Yeah, so that's the registration volunteer. Yeah, so we asked volunteers either get veteran service members, I'll tell them to come back to me. And then we do ask that they volunteer except 1 to 4 pieces a year. Say most volunteers don't do that. I'm not going to kick them off the volunteer registry if they don't. I appreciate anyone who volunteers. And we do accept volunteers who aren't attorneys. We can help with the administrative tasks of setting up a clinic. But the volunteers that are attorneys are definitely more helpful to the program in terms of the legal advice portion, which is what most people are looking for. Oh yeah, we provide training and continuing legal education for attorneys. We just had a CLE, which is continuing legal education, earlier this year on immigration law for veterans advocates. There's special considerations for veterans and service members, immigration issues. We have one coming up on the SCRA service members, so we'll release that. That's still in the works. But we're trying to set up training that's relevant to being a veteran's advocate. And then we also say that it's an opportunity to develop experience, especially for new attorneys to get experience in different kinds of law. Okay, so now I want to talk about kind of how OMVLA has been growing. This is our database that it collects everything that we're doing, all the intake forms, and he individualizes the data, so there's no way I can tell which person clicks on this page. So this is from January 1st, 2021 to August 17th, 2021. Because that's when I turned in this PowerPoint of August 17th, the same time period. The numbers I want to look at are the total requests, which is 88 last year, and then the percent referred to a volunteer attorney, which is the ideal outcome. So last year, from that time period, the 88 requests and 5.7% were referred to volunteers. And then this year, it's more than doubled. So you have 213 total requests from January to August 17th. And almost 10% are referred to the volunteer registry. So we're definitely growing. We're getting a little bit better about connecting to volunteer attorneys and the ideal outcome, because that's going to be most helpful for a veteran or service member. And I can't exactly say why the number of requests have gone up, but we have gotten an AmeriCorps grant that's given us 3 VISTA members, volunteers in service America. And one of them, their whole job is just to do outreach and promote the OMVLA expert. And he is a tireless worker, so I think the job has worked out pretty well, and I think that's why. I'm assuming that's why we have more total requests, but it's hard to say. Yep.
So do volunteer attorneys have to live in Washington? I know that with remote work, it opens the doors to have folks participate in the program, but are they required to be based in Washington?
I think they just have to be barred in Washington. If they live somewhere else, not in Washington.
So if you don't have volunteers from, like, right here, this is not like Shannon Park County.
Right.
If you don't have volunteers in Park County residents, assistance from one of the volunteers from the county.
Yes, yeah. It is preferable to have an attorney from that county, because it's not one of the county rules that we can represent anyone in the state. If you have a $1,000.
Do you have an active recruiting program to try to identify some of these lawyers, or is there any way of getting the word out that they need volunteers and stuff?
Yes, yeah. One of our other business positions, that's their job, is to recruit volunteers.
Okay.
It is tricky. It's just hard to get people to volunteer. It takes
Yeah.
time, and attorneys, the way they work is time is money. Like they're billing by the hour, so
Sure.
they spend time and losing money. So kind of unfortunate, but we try to be as flexible as we can. We try to make it a good program to volunteer for. If you're one of our outstanding volunteers, we have a special recognition program, the letter from the Attorney General and all that. So we do our best to make it a good place to volunteer. Yeah, and then, I was just going to say in the upcoming year, this past year, the VISTAs we're working on just capacity building, like getting the program up and running. And this next year, we're going to focus on serving underserved communities, rural areas of the state, and then again those vulnerable populations like Indigenous people of color, LGBT+, and populations like that. That's the focus. So this resource guide that I was referring to earlier, we are, I think tomorrow, going to publish an update. So looking forward to that. It's 30 pages of a lot of all the up-to-date law that apply to veterans and service members in Washington. It even has some sample forms in the back. It's pretty cool. And then
When's that going to be out?
tomorrow.
Online.
There's already one up, but we have published an update tomorrow.
Okay, it's just online, you don't have like booklets?
Yeah, no, but if you want a physical copy, we're happy to print it and send it. We do that a lot. And then, I don't really need to talk about the other resources, I feel like those are the people that are here today. But we have a lot of partners all over the city, so just a couple of them. And then, yeah, you can email me or call me if you have questions. I'm happy.
This is awesome. I was wondering how other states have something like this.
There's a couple. I know Nevada was the first.
Also, there's like 5 or 6 maybe.
We were thinking of forming like a coalition. Yeah, working together. Yeah. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
So, do you have any specific requests from us to help find those volunteers for you? I mean, are there like best practices where our veterans need this? So anything we can do, I think, to throw volunteers your way.
Anything you can do, I would appreciate. We like publishing like newsletters, and that turns my read. We recently had a social media campaign. We asked about asking for volunteers.
I was going to add to your statement. I know that, like, I used to work in the Baltimore City's Veteran Treatment Court, and they used to do a partnership with the Legal Athletic Academy at the University of Maryland to have some of the interns under the leadership of, under supervision of the public defenders and their professors do certain legal things. So, another technique to go forward.
I just keep on going to the Reserve and National Guard JAG offices.
Yeah.
That we have always been great for outreach.
Yeah.
Again, I do prison outreach, so the question is if a spouse on the outside needs legal assistance, but they don't have the ability to, I mean, you wouldn't be working with the veteran, you'd be working with the,
Yeah.
is that okay?
That's fine.
One more question?
Oh, sure.
Do you know any criminal resources? I get asked a lot for
I do too,
that.
And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And I feel like there's a lack of that for sure. I think people just assume public defenders.
Yeah, I think that's his kind. But you may not have a public offender
Right.
and still need some legal skills.
I think I'm going to turn it over to John now. Thank you.
Very good.
All right, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep. Sounds good.
All right, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be presenting today. I would have preferred to have been there in person, but I had a couple case-related obligations in my civilian job, so that means you get to see a distant version of John Nelson. So I am an Assistant Attorney General and Litigation Team Leader at the Washington AG's office, but more specifically, I'm housed in the Consumer Protection Division. I was hired specifically to be the office's subject matter expert and chief litigator on matters involving service members, active duty service members, and veterans in the state. And I should tell everybody, I suppose, in full disclosure, I'm an Army vet myself. I made my way to Washington, kind of like a lot of folks do, by having a stop at then Fort Lewis. I had a year-long tour in Iraq, and then came out to Fort Lewis, and then I left the service from Fort Lewis. I continued to be in the service by way of the Army Reserve, where I am a command judge advocate for a one-star command at JDLM. So when I'm not doing civil litigation for the AG's office, I am shaving my beard off and trimming my hair and being a drilling reservist. So these issues are what I do. They're near and dear to my heart. And if I have any Army references like Private Snuffy or jokes or whatever, you're just going to have to forgive me today. So one of the really important things I want to convey to this audience is the fact that one of the things I do is I'm the chief prosecutor in the state of Washington for Service Member Civil Relief Act violations. In 2014, our state legislature amended our then existing SCRA, which hadn't been touched in years, to do a couple important things. One, they made a violation of the federal SCRA a violation of the state SCRA. And two, they gave my office investigative power. So if I believe an entity is violating the SCRA, I can issue them essentially a subpoena and get business records and information regarding those violations. So if any of you in the audience or friends are active duty service members and you believe that you are aware of a SCRA violation, I'm the person to talk to. I certainly can't represent an individual person or service member the way my colleague can, but I represent the interests of the people of the state of Washington, and we have significant interests. If I were in person, I usually bring up some slides dealing with the veteran and active duty population, but Washington's veteran population alone is about 560 to 570,000 folks. And then its active duty population is, kind of hovers around 60 or 70,000 folks among the services. So generally speaking, our veteran population in Washington is about 10% of the population. So we punch above our weight in terms of that. That's partially why people like me exist in my job. Now, some important takeaways in terms of what I do, how I can help you, how I can help people or veterans or service members you're advocating for. One of the best services that my office operates is what's called the Consumer Resource Center. And the Consumer Resource Center is kind of just like it sounds. It's a group of consumer resource specialists who are manning phones, computers, and other things, and they are helping consumers in the state of Washington seek consumer protection related resources, and they're also a group that facilitates and looks at complaints relating to all sorts of businesses in the state of Washington. So you may have a veteran or an active duty service member who's a family member, a friend, somebody you're advocating for. One of their first stops, if they have a consumer issue, may just be the Consumer Resource Center. And the beauty of this program is in 2020, we received 25,491 complaints. These can be complaints about anything under the moon in consumer issues. But in response to those complaints, that subcomponent of my office was able to get $10,851,000 back to consumers. And if we have any good math people in the audience, that's about $425 per complaint. Now I want to make a few things clear. If you complain to my office and you allege you bought an item and it was never shipped, or you're having an issue with your mortgage servicer or any number of things, we will take that complaint in, it will be reviewed, and then it will be submitted to the business itself with a cover letter from the Attorney General's office. And that cover letter will ask the business to respond to the consumer's complaint within 21 days. This is a volunteer process, so we can't compel a business to respond, but the vast majority do respond. And when they respond, it may be a response that says, we believe the consumer's complaint is unjustified, and here's a bunch of evidence we've attached to show that. They may say, you know what, the consumer's right, we're sorry, and enclosed see a refund check, and it could be anything in between. The reason I mention this program is it's a very effective sort of alternative dispute resolution program. The worst case scenario for you or anyone you're advocating for is that they spend 10 minutes submitting a complaint and the business disagrees with them. But more often than not, some form of consumer relief comes. So it's a good way to get the attention of a state entity. And when a business receives a letter from a state entity, I think they take that complaint seriously. When you fill out the form, anybody who advocate, they can do it online. So if you Google Washington Attorney General, submit a complaint, it'll pop right up. You'll have the opportunity to just sit on your couch, type up the narrative, attach any documents you think are relevant, and then you can shoot it off. So it's a very user-friendly format. And for those of you who are helping veterans who lack internet access or just aren't comfortable submitting a complaint on the internet, they are free to submit a complaint form in paper. So it's sent to my office. If they call my office, we will send a complaint form to them so that they can fill it out and receive help that way. One of the other things that I do, and is sort of an expertise or a focus area of mine, are a couple laws that I think significantly impact veterans. One of which is called the Pension Poacher Prevention Act, the Pppa, lots of alliteration there, and the other is the Estate Distribution Documents Act. I've been involved in a number of investigations and settlements over our Pension Poacher Prevention Act, and in about 2014, the Attorney General, sponsored legislation to make the act of charging a veteran to assist in the submission of an application for VA benefits to be a violation of law in Washington. And so what that's designed to prevent are, sort of quote-unquote estate planners, financial planners, who are trying to lure veterans in or under the allure of veteran benefits. They then get that veteran's entire financial portfolio, and they use that as an opportunity to push financial products on that veteran that might not be in that veteran's best interest. And so the whole point of the Pension Poacher Prevention Act was to ensure that those people who are assisting veterans in terms of applying for VA benefits, that they're qualified to do that, and that and those people are entitled to receive compensation under federal. To put differently, we just want to ensure that veterans are receiving this assistance from good organizations who provide that free of charge, or from VA accredited folks who are charging them the amounts that they're allowed to under federal law. I'm happy to provide information regarding that and other things. One of the things I typically do actually on an annual basis is I provide a CLE to all the JAG offices in the state. And I provide them with updates on trends that I'm seeing, laws that are passed, or anything that we see as a help to assisting active duty service members and veterans. So under the Consumer Protection Act, my focus, as I mentioned before, is veterans and service members. An interesting part of the actual Consumer Protection Act is that just last year, our state legislature amended the act to make a violation of the Consumer Protection Act that targets an active duty or veteran, an active duty service member, or to be entitled to an enhanced civil penalty. So what that means is, in a situation where a veteran or service member is being targeted, I can ask the court to impose higher civil penalties for that. And I spend a lot of time involved in cases that both benefit veterans and service members. You may have seen in the news just last month, Washington, along with the Federal Trade Commission and a handful of other states, settled a lawsuit with an entity called Harris Jewelers. Harris Jewelers was a military-focused, military-centric chain of jewelry stores that operated almost exclusively outside of large military installations. In Washington's case, they had a store in the Tacoma Mall, and they also offered online sales of jewelry. What our investigation revealed is that they would specifically target service members with their reliable pay. They would do promotions in and around military installations, lure the young private snuffies of the world in, and they would sell grossly overpriced jewelry of low quality at interest rates that violated the Military Lending Act. As part of that settlement, there is significant relief entitled for Harris consumers in Washington and nationwide. If you know somebody who purchased from Harris, if you yourself are a Harris customer or a veteran, you may be entitled to one of two benefits. The first benefit is that Harris is going to stop collecting on any of its financing contracts for that jewelry, which means if you entered into a contract for that jewelry is yours, and you have no obligation to pay any future payment. And the other area you may be entitled to a benefit is if you bought any of Harris's extended warranties related to jewelry or watches or any of the other things they sell, you may be entitled to a dollar for dollar refund. If you Google that Harris Jeweler Settlement, you'll see a link on a website where you can go submit a claim. So if any of you are attorneys out there, or any of you know folks who are attorneys who help veterans, make sure when they come in and they're talking to their client to say, hey, by the way, did you happen to buy anything at Harris over the past few years? And that's just one of many cases that Attorney General Ferguson and my office have been focused on for service members. We also shut down a chain of furniture stores called Freedom Furniture. Not surprisingly, there was nothing free about it, and they sat right outside of major military installations, including in Washington, in Lakewood, just outside of JDLM. And then USA Discounters as well. Which leads me back to another law for everyone to be aware of who's a veterans advocate. It's the Estate Distribution Document. A lot of alliteration. We call it the EDDA. In Washington, it is unlawful to market living trusts, wills, or any estate planning to a consumer unless that individual is an attorney. So what that means is, if you're a financial planner or any other person, and you're marketing to a veteran, or any other person, doesn't have to be a veteran in this case, but for purposes of this presentation, you're marketing to a veteran, you can't come into their home, talk about pros and cons of living trusts, attempt to sell them annuities, unless you are a practicing attorney. So Washington has a lot of unique protections for active duty service members and for veterans, and I'm the person you'd want to talk to if you think there's a violation going on. So if you do think there's a violation, I'm happy to field a call. I'm happy to take an email. Alternatively, you can also submit those concerns to my office via the Consumer Resource Center. I want to talk a little bit, I'm meandering, but I have a lot to get out, and my hope is that from my presentation, you'll just take away, I remember that guy, he had a blockhead, I saw him on a weird screen, barely heard him in a presentation, but I know he's the STRA prosecutor, I know he focuses on veterans cases, I think he can help. I have spent a lot of time over the past couple of years investigating and litigating towing companies for violations of the Service Member Civil Relief Act. The STRA provides unique protections, obviously, to service members, and one of the important ones is that if an active duty service member's car is towed, even if the tow is legal, if that towing company attempts to sell that car at auction because the car isn't redeemed by that service member, then that towing company has to have a court order to do so. And this reflects the fact that active duty service members could be in any corner of the earth at any given time. And so they want judicial scrutiny of a service member's vehicle being sold. In 2018, I received a call in my office from a Navy lieutenant who was a JAG. I'm trying to remember if she was up at Whitby or Bremerton. But she called me and said, John, I think I have a client here who was out to sea on a carrier, came back home and couldn't find his car anywhere, then later realized that it had been towed from an apartment parking lot and then sold by a towing company without a court order. I looked into it, had that lieutenant's client submit a complaint to my office, and it turns out that that was one of many instances where a Tacoma tow company had done just that. Complying with this law has become one of Attorney General Ferguson's focus points, to the point where my office sent a letter to all 408 towing companies in the state of Washington, making them aware of this law and making it clear that we expect folks to comply with it. The same is also true in the storage complex or context. So if a service member is PCSing from Washington and they're temporarily putting their goods in a public storage facility, they have the same protection. So you may be used to, I kind of have a guilty pleasure sometimes watching Storage Wars on, I forget if it's Discovery. I realize it's a little cheesy, but that's usually what happens. So if a civilian were to sign a contract to store items, stop making payment on that contract, the owner of the storage company can simply sell those items or the contents of the storage unit in an auction, and then apply the money they receive from that auction to the different things. That's not the case when an active duty service member. If an active duty service member is storing goods in a storage unit, before those goods can be sold at auction, there must be a court order in place. But the benefits to Washington service members aren't limited to the federal SCRA. Washington's state SCRA is among the most robust in the country and includes lots of neat protections. If you have friends or colleagues who are reservists and they are being called to active duty, deploying, there are protections in the state SCRA that would allow you to cancel a gym contract, for example. Private Snuffy loves to be a member of an expensive CrossFit gym, and this is yet another example where, pursuant to his or her service, if they are called to active duty, they are able to terminate that contract. That also extends to things like cable television, cell phone contracts, and even satellite TV or satellite radio. So one of the things, the takeaways I hope to convey here is take a look at Washington's SCRA. It's Revised Code of Washington, Chapter 38.42, and it's a powerful tool, and it's there for you if you yourself are a reservist or active duty, and it's also there for you for if any of your family members are. I really think one of the things I've learned about traveling around the state, talking to veterans, talking to service members, and talking to folks who just simply their advocates, is they actually aren't aware of how many awesome laws there are in Washington that provide these unique benefits to service members. I want to call everybody's attention as well to scams related to VA home loans and VA benefits generally. Companies large and small like to buy batches of consumer data. One of those batches, of course, is whether or not a consumer or the person they're targeting is a veteran. They'll often buy data that says, I'd like to know everyone who has a VA loan in an entire county, so that they can then get a mailing list and send typically good old-fashioned solicitations about VA loan benefits that service member may or may not be entitled to, and they use that to lure them in to sell other mortgages and products. I don't mean to suggest that all of those are scams at all. I'm only conveying that that's an area where we're finding particularly more elderly veterans are vulnerable. And the other is just VA benefits generally. What we find is for those veterans who are advanced in age and who have sons and daughters and brothers and sisters or spouses who are attempting to navigate the maze of VA benefits, they are very commonly pulled towards entities that charge them exorbitant fees to do what a lot of you in this crowd could do for free, or a lot of you in this crowd could direct to various veteran service organizations to do that same work for free. So I just always want to bang the drum about the benefited veteran service organizations and what they do for service members and veterans and their family members for purposes of obtaining benefits. Frequent flyers and frequent flyer complaints to my office that are not veteran specific, but who naturally include veterans, because veterans are 10% of our population. Auto sales, in particular, anything related to automobiles, from the marketing, the purchase, financing, maintenance, that is a huge portion of our complaints. Broadband and telecommunications, so we're talking about phone companies, internet companies, any of that. Please note, though, that due to a Washington Supreme Court case called State versus Schwab, that unlike a lot of states, residential landlord-tenant matters, so landlord-tenant issues, are not covered by our state's consumer protection. This is a little unique, in many states they are, which means that if you or someone submit a complaint to my office that says, my landlord is terrible, I have a mold-infested unit, they have not done any mold remediation, and trash is piling up, lots of comments that a lot of people have experienced, you will get a letter probably from a rep in my office that says, unfortunately, landlord-tenant matters are outside of our purview. Now, landlord-tenant area is yet another area where there are significant protections and benefits for active duty service members. So again, your veterans out there who may be reservists like me or National Guardsmen or women, when they're called to active duty in both the state context and the federal context, they have protections under the Landlord-Tenant Act that allow them to terminate their leases early. So not only do they have protections under the SCRA, they also have protections under the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act. So I've been talking a lot. I can't see anybody. I've been looking at myself talking, which is not fun. But I wanted to open it up now to see whether anybody had any questions. There were any hands up in the audience just about what I do, how I can help folks. So I just take a few second pause to see if there are any questions.
Can you hear me, John?
I can.
Perfect. My name's Salvador. I have a question. If a service member submits a form on the portal to submit, a consumer issue, what sort of information is made public, and should the service member have any concern about any possible disclosure of information that they submit?
Absolutely excellent question, and an area I was going to discuss in just a bit, so thank you for that question. When a consumer submits a complaint form to my office, and this would also include any attachment, they, in order to have that complaint submitted to the business that they're complaining about, they have to sign a certification making clear that they understand that the complaint and the attachments become a public record. This is important because, let's say, for example, my office gets a public records request for, I'll just say Comcast, for no particular reason, whatever, a car dealership. Then that complaint that was submitted on that issue, let's say by a service member, that would naturally be responsive. So what I tell everybody who's submitting complaints is that if your client or just the person you're trying to help has concerns about any of their stuff becoming public, they are free to redact anything they wish as part of that. So for example, they could delete a vehicle identification number, they could delete any account number on something, they could delete any sensitive pictures. Really, it's up to them to decide what they want to give or not give. So now I will say the more evidence that they provide in a complaint, the better ability that the business has to investigate the complaint and to respond to the complaint and to hopefully provide some concessions to your client. But this is very important because Washington also has a very robust public records law. Which leads me to a final point in this area, and that is sometimes consumers want to notify my office of an issue they may have with a business or just an issue generally, but they don't want the business to process the complaint. They have that option too. So they can check a box that says, do not submit this complaint to the business. And when they submit a complaint, opportunity to select various demographic data, including whether they are an active duty service member or whether they're a veteran. Now, when they select yes on either of those things, that doesn't mean they're going to get some form of expedited service, but it's exceptionally helpful to me and my office and investigators who are constantly looking at our complaint data for trends. So if I see, for example, that in a month we've gotten 27 complaints from veterans on a single business, somebody's going to flag that for me and I'm going to take a look at that. So I really urge anybody who's submitting a complaint to include the veteran or service member demographics. Likewise, if you think the complaint violates a specific law, like the SCRA, the Pension Poacher Prevention Act, or the Estate Distribution Documents Act, go ahead and spell that out in the complaint, because sometimes I'm just on my lunch hour, for example, I'm looking at our complaint database to see if there are trends I should be aware of or just relevant complaints out there. So awesome question. And the important takeaway from that question is, yes, anything you provide is going to become a public record. So if you have concerns about that, leave things out, redact, or kind of control any sensitive information that way. Any other questions? Okay, so let me jump here. I'd like to also offer myself, particularly to any veteran practitioners out there, as a resource or perhaps a person to whom you can talk to get a veteran point of contact in another state. I spend a lot of my time, probably 50% of my time, litigating and investigating cases with other states. So, for example, the Harris jewelry case was led by the state of New York, and was also, Washington was one of the co-leads, along with Georgia, California, and others. And so over the years, I've developed a pretty good network of contacts, friends, and professionals, where if I have a veteran issue, or you have a client or a friend or somebody who needs a veteran point of contact in a different state, they can reach out to me, and I'm going to do my best to get that for you. That's just one of the things that I've leveraged over the years. And whereas it's not a literal cigar box, I keep a little contact book where folks can come to me, or if I need something in the future. Also, I have a lot of experience in the legal assistance context as well. When I was a brand new active duty JAG years ago, one of my first assignments was at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, providing legal assistance to active duty service members and dependents there. years later in my career, I was the chief of the office at then Joint Base Lewis McChord when we pulled in the Air Force as well. And of course, just as a drilling reservist and a command judge advocate now, these legal assistance issues and all this stuff continue to be important issues for my command because they're important issues for his soldiers. So I'm going to wrap up. I can give the point of contact who handles materials, obviously, for this convention, all of my contact information, but I'll go ahead and give it to everybody now as well. My email address is John, John, .Nelson, Nelson, at ATG, that's Alpha Tango Golf, .wa.gov. So it's john.nelson at atg.wa.gov. That's my work address. My phone number is 206-389-3842. Yes, that is my direct line, and I know I give it to a bunch of people I can't see at my own peril. The only qualification I will ask is occasionally my number will get out as like a veteran or service member clearinghouse in the state, and I'll get calls from all sorts of folks assuming that I can provide them immediate help. What I want to convey again is that I don't represent individual service members or veterans or even consumers for that matter. I represent the interests of the state of Washington. Thankfully for all of you in here and veterans generally, veterans are a very big focus area for my Attorney General. He gives me the resources I need to bring cases that bring meaningful relief. But again, I can't provide immediate assistance to a service member. And so you've got my contact information. I'm happy to take calls for people. I'm also happy to offer myself to provide more substantive presentations if you want to say, John, could my organization receive a presentation strictly on consumer issues relating to veterans, scams relating to veterans? I'll say sure. If you'd like me to give a presentation on the SCRA and really get down into the weeds about how it benefits you and people you advocate for, let me know. I can really do as you wish. I like getting out of the office. I like meeting people who are focused on veterans issues. I miss sometimes the camaraderie of the old active duty times when I was in the Army. So I really do like helping people, meeting people, but being your resource. So keep me in mind. Also, I will close. My division houses other focus areas that may be relevant to you when you advocate for a veteran. One of those is our Lemon Law program. The attorney in charge of our Lemon Law program, Mark Worthy, he is also a veteran himself, and he actually used to be in my reserve unit. He is what I call our car guru. So if you're trying to work through a car issue on behalf of a veteran, I'm sure he would love to talk to you. And I'll give you his email address. He's probably twitching right now and doesn't know why, but I'm going to do it. It's Mark, M-A-R-C, .Worthy, W-O-R-T-H-Y, at atg.wa.gov. We also have, within the Consumer Protection Division, what's called our Manufactured Housing Dispute Resolution Program. It's a mouthful, but what it means is that for mobile homes, trailers, manufactured housing, there is a separate Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, and we handle disputes related to that act within our office as well. So if you have whereas I first said, I can't help you guys on regular old Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, my division can be of assistance if you, your client, your friend, lives in a mobile home park which is subject to a different law. And that program can be Googled, and it has the same information about sort of how to submit a complaint. If you submit a complaint via our manufactured housing program or our lemon law program, the same thing applies. It becomes a public record, so redact or withhold accordingly. So having said all of that, it's been a real pleasure to present today. I would have loved to have been there in person, but I hope the takeaway is I can be a potential point of contact or an information clearinghouse where I can get you to the right person. And feel free to reach out to me. And that said, I will give one more opportunity for questions. But if not, it was great presenting.
Yeah, what was that? Like, where do you find information on Harris Jewelry? Is that, you just Google that?
Oh, thank you. If you email me, I can send you case-specific information. But if you just alternatively Google Harris Jewelers and FTC or Harris Jewelers in Washington lawsuit, all the press releases will pop right up. So my office issued a press release, and then in that press release is information. And I really thank you for asking that question, because I want to underscore again, there is potentially $34 million of relief for service members and veterans in that case. And much of it, the refunds are a claims-based process. If you think somebody may be eligible, they don't know, they don't remember when they bought, my advice is to have them submit a claim. Because the worst case scenario is the claims adjuster will look and know you're not eligible. More likely, they will be eligible. My paralegal also, if you contact my office, we have a list of consumers. Now that's not a perfect list, but we can generally try to look up people to tell them what they're eligible for as well. So again, it's potentially $34 million of relief coming.
And then my question's real quick and kind of personal. Can you tell us what division you're with in the reserves?
Oh, sure. I'm in the 104th Training Division. So I'm the Command Judge Advocate, which means the Commanding General, I'm his one-stop legal shop, and we just had a change of command, actually, so I'm getting a new commander. So when I'm not doing this job, I'm sometimes taking up my weekends or weeks in the summer, and I'm at JBLM, or since the 104th has so many downtrace units across the country, I may be in the southeast somewhere as well.
From another Timberwolf, thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's great. Good brother and sisterhood.
Yeah, it was 104th.
All right, thank you all. If you feel happy, please reach out to me if I can be of assistance.
Yeah.
Thank you.